All right, let's just get right into it. For what, like 2 decades, Jack Black was basically this mythical creature in Hollywood. You know, the one guy nobody had a problem with. He was just this icon of pure chaotic fun. But man, in the last couple of years, something has seriously changed. The guy who was once called a national treasure is now suddenly facing this huge wave of backlash that feels like it came out of thin air.
And you know what? Not too long ago, a comment like this was just a fact. It was just true. He was the undisputed king of fun, the one celebrity we could all actually agree on. Trying to dislike Jack Black felt like trying to dislike, I don't know, pizza or puppies. It was basically impossible. His whole vibe was just infectious joy. But you fast forward to right now, and the whole conversation has been flipped on its head. It's almost unrecognizable. The comment sections that used to be filled with love are now just battlegrounds, total frustration and anger. So the big question is, what in the world happened? How do you go from national treasure to being the target of all this online fury so fast? Yeah, that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? How did the guy who gave us School of Rock, the legend that is Nacho Libre, go from being this beloved icon to, well, to a guy people are actively trying to cancel? It's a really tangled story, but it all seems to boil down to a few key moments that just changed everything. Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we're going to rewind a bit and look at the golden age of Jack Black. What made him everyone's favorite rock star? Then, we'll get into how his activism started putting him on the wrong side of a lot of his fans. After that, we'll dig into how his actual career and on-stage stuff started getting criticized. And finally, we're going to ask that huge question. Can the king actually make a comeback? All right, let's kick things off by remembering the Jack Black that we all thought we knew, the one that kind of took over the world. See, for years, he wasn't just an actor or a musician. He was this force of nature, built on one simple, beautiful idea: having a good time all the time. I mean, these words right here, this was him. He was the definition of unproblematic, a totally safe bet in Hollywood, which is full of scandals, right? His energy was this perfect storm of chaotic and somehow adorable. He was the kind of guy who could do a silly belly flop into a pool for a video, and it just made you love him even more. He was, pretty much by a global consensus, a national treasure. And this is really the core of his appeal. Just think about it for a second. His most famous roles, his band Tenacious D, even his Jablinski Games YouTube channel, where, let's be honest, he barely played any games and mostly just posted these hilarious, goofy vlogs. It was all pointing to one thing: Jack Black is here to make you happy. For decades, he built up this massive, massive bank account of goodwill with all of us. But as we all know, that goodwill, it can be a pretty fragile thing. And in Jack Black's story, the first few cracks in that perfect public image started to show up in a place nobody expected. So where did it all start to go sideways? Well, it wasn't a movie role or a bad song, it was his off-screen choices. Now, this is where it gets really complicated, because on the surface, supporting a charity seems like a great thing, right? Well, for years, Jack Black was a big supporter of Autism Speaks. The problem is, for a huge and very vocal part of the autistic community, Autism Speaks is seen as a genuinely harmful organization. Critics say the charity has a history of talking about autism like it's a disease that needs to be cured, and they point to old campaigns that seem to paint autistic kids as a burden. The argument is that the charity speaks over autistic people, not for them. So when fans first started pointing this out to him online, the general vibe was, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. People were saying, oh, he probably just doesn't know. Someone should tell him. But then years went by, and his support for the organization just kept going, even with all the public outcry. And that's when the perception totally soured. The conversation went from, he's just uninformed, to he knows, and he just doesn't care. And for the very first time, people started to wonder if he was really the wholesome, considerate guy they'd always believed him to be. And that questioning, it only got louder as his politics got more and more direct. I mean, in the old days, his politics were always wrapped up in comedy, like a Tenacious D song. Even his PSAs in 2020 about wearing a mask were classic Jack Black: shirtless, absurd, jumping into a pool. But then, the whole tone changed. He put out a very serious statement about the Israel/Palestine conflict, and by 2024, he was making direct endorsements for president. The goofy rock star had become a serious political voice. So this was part of his statement. And look, on paper, it's a pretty moderate, nuanced take, right? It's trying to hold two very complex ideas at the same time. But we all know how social media works. Nuance is the first thing to go out the window. That statement landed like a bomb, just sparking these furious arguments and dividing his audience even more. And the blowback was immediate. It was loud. His social media, which used to be this fun place for memes, just turned into this toxic mess. The comments were just flooded with "stick to comedy," "stay in your lane," and people calling him a sellout. And it wasn't just online talk. It started spilling over into his work, with people calling for a boycott of Kung Fu Panda 4, all because of who was doing the voice of Po. The lovable, funny guy was now the controversial political guy. But it didn't stop there. The controversy wasn't just about his personal beliefs anymore. Pretty soon, it started to bleed into his professional life. You know, the very thing that made him a star in the first place. And a few key events made fans start to wonder if he'd lost his touch there too.
Yeah, for a lot of people, this was the real tipping point. It all happened on tour. Tenacious D was back on the road doing what they do best, right? Rocking out, making people laugh. But during one of their shows in Sydney, this one little unscripted moment just blew up into a firestorm that had very, very real consequences.
So his bandmate, his best friend, Kyle Gass, makes this kinda off-the-cuff joke about Donald Trump. And instantly you could feel the whole mood in the arena just shift. Half the crowd starts cheering and laughing, but this huge wave of boos just rolls through the place. The room was totally split in two. And of course, the clip went viral almost immediately.
Okay, so this is where it gets really messy. Kyle Gass apologized, but then Jack Black put out his own statement, and his was different. He said he was blindsided by the joke and didn't approve of it. The problem? Fans immediately found the concert footage, and you can clearly see Jack on stage laughing right along with the joke. For a lot of people, that apology felt completely fake. It came across like he was throwing his best friend under the bus just to save face. And this is where it goes from online drama to real-world impact. Not long after this whole thing blew up, Tenacious D announced they were canceling the rest of their tour dates in Australia and New Zealand, and they specifically cited the controversy. What was supposed to be this huge, triumphant tour just crashed and burned into a PR nightmare. All from one joke and a really badly received apology.
So the hits just kept on coming. The criticism wasn't just about the tour anymore. It spread to his day job, his film career. It was all part of this growing feeling that maybe Jack Black's professional instincts were off. When they announced he was going to play Steve in the Minecraft movie, the reaction online wasn't excitement. It was just this collective groan.
And that casting choice, for a lot of fans, just seemed to confirm what they were already feeling. The criticism got broader. He's not really acting anymore. He's just playing Jack Black in every single movie. Whether it was Claptrap and Borderlands or even Po and Kung Fu Panda 4, it felt like he was just doing slight variations of the same shtick. People started calling it lazy casting, saying he was just cashing in on his name without really trying to create a character anymore.
Which, of course, brings us to today, right now. Jack Black is standing at a massive crossroads. The guy who was once totally untouchable is now a really divisive figure. That huge bank account of goodwill he'd spent decades building up, it's been seriously depleted. So the last and maybe the most important question is this: can the king ever get his crown back?
And this really breaks down the two sides of the argument perfectly. You've got his defenders who say, hey, the guy is just being himself. He's a human being, he has opinions, he doesn't deserve all this hate. But then you have the critics, and they argue that it's not about him being authentic. The problem is that he's lost touch with that fun-loving, carefree persona that made everyone fall in love with him to begin with. And that debate is still raging. So what would a comeback even look like? I mean, there's a pretty standard playbook for this stuff, right? It could involve a really genuine, heartfelt apology that actually owns up to the missteps. Or maybe a deliberate pivot back to the goofy, apolitical fun that made him famous. Or, hey, maybe all it takes is that one incredible, critically acclaimed role that just blows everyone away and reminds us all how talented he actually is. Who knows if he's willing or even able to do any of that? But let's zoom out for a second as we wrap this up. Is this whole story really just about Jack Black? Or is it maybe a sign of something bigger? A fundamental change in how we see celebrities? An era where the idea of a universally loved or unproblematic star is just impossible now? An era where any public figure is just one bad joke or one tweet away from it all coming crashing down? It's definitely something to think about.